James, what's the purpose of off-payroll?
So off-payroll came about because, as we all know, contractors know each other really well. It's a pretty close-knit network. But there isn't a central place where contractors can come together and share their experiences on IR35, either good or bad. So off-payroll, it's kind of like a utility belt for contractors to help them find clients who are delivering fair IR35 assessments, agents who are truly working with clients to get IR35 right, and also to help them navigate the contracts that are out there and try and find those fairly assessed contracts as well.
By the very nature of what a contractor does, they work independently, don't they? So
yes.
Having a forum that's there for them to sort of have a voice and a shared experience is a really useful organisation to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from personal experience, contractors are everywhere, but they're also nowhere. There's no central point that brings contractors together, and that's what we're trying to do here, is just allow people to share their experiences and get themselves together, because they're not unionised, and there are professional bodies, but there's just not that single forum to allow people to have those conversations and share their knowledge as well.
Yeah, and it's really important that the off-payroll sort of contractor base is recognised as something that's so valuable and important to the country and to the economy, because, as you say, they can be somewhat invisible. So it's great for them to have that opportunity to demonstrate the value that they're bringing.
Absolutely. If we think about a typical contractor, consultant, they've got skills, and they come in, on assignments on a specific part of a project to get something going, and the business doesn't need to have that experience, there permanently 12 months a year. And they are that kind of that agile factor that allows companies to ramp up projects, deliver, generate revenue, drive the GDP of the country, whatever it may be. And they are this kind of, like I say, this invisible force. They come into projects and they disappear, and away they come to the next one.
You've obviously got an area for contractors to have a forum and a discussion.
Yes.
What about for clients and for recruitment companies as well?
Yeah, so we're building out, so a few things that we're doing. So there's an area on the site where you can go and look at what clients are doing. And one of my colleagues has a great saying, which is, sunshine is the greatest disinfectant. So what we're doing is allowing us to look inside the clients and see what's going on. So it means that contractors can figure out if clients are doing IR35 assessments fairly, or if there's something there that's not quite right. But it's the same for recruiters as well. So you can go onto the site, and we're building out a list of vetted recruitment agents. So we know personally from engaging with recruitment agents, there's a lot of really good recruitment agents out there who are working hard to get IR35 right, to work with clients to deliver these fair assessments, and that's what we want to do through off-payroll, is we want to really shine a light on these guys who are delivering IR35 fairly.
Where does your motivation to undertake this work actually come from?
So it comes about, so if you look at even at HMRC's policy paper when it comes to IR35, 66% of contractors, 2/3 of contractors are outside IR35. By HMRC's own account, that's what they're saying. And where this came about is that we looked at what happened after Christmas, and the amount of PSC bans and unfair assessments that were starting to appear from IR35 really started to bite. And I think about, personally, I think about, as a CEO of an accountancy firm, and I look at our own clients, and I know they all work really hard to work as genuine businesses, and they're getting unfairly locked out of clients. So that's where this motivation has come along, is that actually, how do we help the 2/3 of contractors and consultants who are genuinely outside of IR35, and help to try and unlock the market and make sure those guys continue to operate their businesses. We're drawn to the headlines about large banks, the large PLCs, and to be honest, I have a lot of sympathy towards them, because they've got a huge task ahead of them, thousands of contractors. The legislation still hasn't settled down, so here we are 8 weeks away, and it's still changing.
Yeah.
So of course, they're just thinking, what can we do to mitigate risk, and that's when they come out with things like the PSC bans. But look down the tree, look at the smaller clients, look at the small recruitment agents. If you're a smaller firm, you've got a lot to lose if you're losing your contractors. So these smaller firms are working really hard to get IR35 right. So you'd actually see a lot of household names on the off-payroll website who are getting IR35 right.
Yeah, you're right. It's easy to be drawn to the negative stories. It's easy to be drawn to this is not good. The people doing blanket bans, things like that. You don't tend to get the same sort of coverage for those that are doing things well, carefully considered. They are doing things properly, but they do exist.
Yes.
And that's great that you can see that from the platform.
Yeah, absolutely.
But those companies that are doing things well will be the ones that stand to attract the best talent in the long run.
We all know that GSK came out early with a blanket ban on PSCs. But in the last few weeks alone, we're starting to see pharmaceutical companies coming out and delivering fair IR35 assessments. if I was sat on the board of GSK, I'd be getting a little bit hot under the collar and
kicking
thinking,
yourself for an early, for an early decision.
Absolutely, and I think the smart companies out there who realise that this is actually the opportunity to gain a competitive advantage. And it's not difficult to get this stuff right, and actually it's less risky to get it right than it is to fumble through this and deliver unfair assessments or go with PSC bands. So I think that's probably what we start to see is that look at something like the pharmaceutical industry. They're not the only industry where we've got people who are breaking away from the pack, delivering fair assessments, and hopefully that will then start to defrost this block that we've got in the market at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm finding at the current time that there's a lot of noise out there in the marketplace, lots of different opinions. What trends are you seeing?
I think, the main thing that we can all relate to is the fact that large organisations came out early with these bans, and as we came back from our Christmas holidays, it was like a domino effect, and more companies have just come out and banned PSCs. So if you look at that, it might paint quite a depressing picture. But what we're starting to see now is we start to talk to recruitment agents like yourselves. Also, we're having conversations with IR35 assessors. These are third parties who are delivering IR35 assessments. Everybody's very busy. I had a conversation with somebody yesterday, an IR35 assessor who's completed almost 4,800 IR35 assessments. And this is a company that you've never heard of. This is not a top tier IR35 assessor. This is something that you might not have heard of. So there's a lot of people now who are really busy trying to get IR35 right, particularly when you look at smaller clients. The loss of contractors will impact their business greatly, so they know full well that they need to get on and get this sorted and deliver fair IR35 assessments. So in terms of the trends, there's a lot going on with the blanket bans, but I think over the next few weeks you're going to still start to see a lot of good news coming out as the smaller firms start to conclude their IR35 assessments.
Yeah, I think we're seeing that as well in terms of the conversations with clients. There's more of an appetite now to sort of get into the detail and really how can this work? How can we resource a project so that it's specifically outside IR35? They're starting to understand how it can be leveraged, what the advantages are, and really starting to get to the crux of genuinely engaging with people in a business-to-business sort of offering. I would concur that we're seeing more of a move towards that. You were always going to get the noise around blanket bans and no PSCs and all of that kind of stuff, but once it settles and you have those who are taking a bit more of a considered approach, a little bit more careful, hopefully, as you say, we'll see more and more clients engaged in that genuine business-to-business way.
You've been pushing for fair IR35 for quite some time, so you guys started 18 months or so ago, I think, engaging clients with this. And how have you found it? Have all your clients kind of taken this equally? Is everybody proactive, or do you still find that you're still trying to help people over the line?
It's been so mixed. There's been businesses that you would have thought would have been engaged ahead of time and allowed us to come in and educate them and look at it sort of case by case. That actually are probably behind the curve, and there's some organisations which no one would ever have heard of who've been really forward thinking, embraced it, and understood that there's a real a threat to their business if they don't engage on this basis, because they will lose that top talent. And anything and everything in between, really. But I think what we have seen is post-Christmas, we've seen more businesses having to rally quite quickly in order to mobilise, make decisions, and actually get that in place, ready for sort of end of March. I think as well that there's some clients that we can influence, there's some clients that we can't influence. There are some clients who've decided early on this is their strategy, this is their approach. So all we can do with those is try to minimise the impacts to contractors. We try to keep them informed as early as possible. We explore what the other options are. We advise them around things like umbrella companies, if that's what they're using, and how to avoid something that might end up in a loan charge type scenario. We try to make sure that we create as soft a landing as we can where we can't influence clients, and then we're just trying to leverage the influence that we do have as much as possible with other clients, and also trying to just make it really clear to clients that you may have chosen a strategy over here, but your competitors are all engaging in a genuine outside IR35 basis. They're doing fair assessments, and so you are going to lose talent. And trying to
to almost let market forces be sort of bubble to the top, so that people can see that actually those decisions over here to avoid a certain risk have actually just created another risk in terms of being able to resource their projects.
Yes. There are some terrible communicators out there. You know, there's a lot of contractors. Here we are, you know, we're eight weeks away from a really significant piece of legislation which has the potential to impact contractors in a big way, personally, and they're still left in the dark. You know, so there's stories of contractors who still haven't had their determination, and they're emailing, you know, their client or recruitment agents 6-10 working days later, they still haven't had a reply. And I think it's one of those things is that I think what a lot of people forget, so a lot of clients and agents may forget, is that most contracts have been dealing with IR35 for 20 years. They're probably quite sympathetic, you know, but just engage with them and have an open dialogue.
Radio silence is the wrong thing to do, because then that builds the fear.
Absolutely.
Of course.
That there's nothing going on.
Of course. And one of the things that when I'm talking to contractors and they say, I haven't been able to speak to the client, you know, I'm not getting anything from them, my sort of reaction is always silence is never a good sign. Because if you're doing it fairly and you know how you're going to do it, you know how you're going to assess things, then there's no reason for silence. You would be communicating that would be your choice.
Yes.
So what made you decide to include vetted agents and to have evolution on there as one of the first ones on there?
So, you know, we've been in this industry for 10 years or so. We know a lot of recruiters out there, and we know there's some really good recruiters who know what's going on with IR35, working in partnership with clients. Because also, you know, what people forget is that this change that's coming in April doesn't just impact end clients, it also impacts recruiters as well. You know, recruiters are on the hook for incorrect determinations. So you kind of put these things together and you realise actually it's in the best interest for recruiters to get this right as well. And I think there's been a lot of high profile cases and stories about large recruiters who are making a hash of this, but we know full well that there are hundreds of recruiters out there who are getting this right. And we want to give those guys the day in the sunshine. And that's what that's about, this vetted list on off payroll, is to say there are people out there who understand it, proactively working with clients, know about, you know, processes for SDSs, for determinations, dispute processes, the people who know about insurances and things like that. And there are a lot of good eggs out there, and it's just trying to, you know, spread the word that actually contractors engage with a recruiter who knows what they're doing, because they're going to really help you find the good clients and hopefully put you in a safe position. And I guess that's where you guys are, because we've said you've been doing this for 18 months. You know, it's
ultimately it's in our interest to make sure that we're doing things properly, protecting ourselves, the contractor, and the end customer in the process.
When you read this draft legislation and you realised that IR35 is something that clients are doing over here, but you as recruiters are on the hook for any mistakes, how did that go down?
Yeah, it didn't go down great.
Right.
The difficulty is obviously for the way that the legislation is written is as long as the client takes reasonable care, so as long as they meet that standard in terms of how they've come about the assessment, even when they get it wrong, we as the agency, we're on the hook. Having that conversation with our board, there was a lot of blank faces around the room saying, huh? And it made sense to me that we then treat going forward the assessments as though it's our responsibility.
Right.
We think about it as though this is our job, because ultimately, if it goes wrong, it's going to come to our door, both commercially and from a liability perspective. So we've tried to take a reasonable, considered approach, but considered the risk as though it's ours. And also, you know, we work in partnership with our clients, and it's said a lot that agents work in partnership with their clients. But it's a genuine thing. We prosper if our clients prosper. If our clients can continue to take up resource for their project, and we can continue to engage with the best people on the market, and we've got a great reputation with them, then we prosper. We are better for it. So to me, it makes perfect sense that we would try to, as the party in the middle, we understand the contractor's needs, we understand the risks, we understand the client's needs, we understand the risks there, and we've got that experience of IR35 over its evolution over the past sort of 20 years, so it makes sense to me that we facilitate the fair assessments that are necessary.
And I guess that's it, it's that sense that now everybody's kind of in this together, you know, whereas previously there were kind of clear boundaries, and contractors were doing their own assessments over here, but they couldn't influence an end client's working practices. And recruitment agents, the IR35 up until that point was just something that happened between those two parties. Whereas now, everybody's got to work together because a contractor's got his own personal working practices that's going to influence the determination. The client is going to be doing that assessment, and the recruiter in the middle, kind of mediating everything, but also, as we say, on the hook should reasonable care not be taken. So it could well, if you're trying to think about some of the positives here, it may well actually be a good thing that we're going to have these closer working relationships. For a contractor after April, the great thing is they're going to go into a contract and they're going to have a clear idea of what the circumstances are, whether it's inside or outside IR35. So there is some good to come from it. And it probably will also shake out some of those agents who are just bums on seat type recruiters who just get people through the door and that's it.
Yeah, fundamentally, it necessitates a change in the way that contracts are delivered, but if clients can be flexible in facilitating that change, then it can be a positive. It genuinely can be a positive. We've seen clients who've engaged in this in a full, fair way. They're coming out, they're attracting the best talent on the market at the best rates. Contractors have got certainty as to what will be happening. The projects are more well scoped because it's a requirement so that they understand what the scope of the delivery is. There's many benefits once you get over the hump, but only if you engage fairly and properly.
The point you've just made on the scoping of the project is a really valuable point for recruiters, because very often the customers will come to us and say, I'd like a developer, I'd like a .NET developer, I need someone with Java skills. And they know they need that much, but they don't give us full detail. So the way that we can actually differentiate ourselves in the marketplace is by giving that full project scope to a contractor. The contractors then will recognise that we're a recruitment company that is representing both the customer and the contractor fairly, but also giving that level of information is really, really valuable. And it actually forces the customer to give us what we've actually been asking for a while, which is greater depth of information.
But you can imagine the power of that as being a contractor, rather than just seeing a very anonymous advert saying, like you say, Java developer required for London, 6-month contract in this industry. It's a case of actually, right, this is the specific project. This is what's going to be going on. These are deliverables, and that's something that contractors can get excited about. They can get a feel for that if that's the client they want to work with. And that becomes a really virtuous circle.
It becomes a talent attraction piece.
Well, that's it. It'll filter out the contractors who look at that and go, actually, that's not my jam. But also, it's going to help you to attract those people who can absolutely be the perfect hire for that. So if the clients can do that work up front to think about the project and who they need, pass that on to recruiters out there to go and find the talent.
Ultimately, we actually share the same goals, and that's to enable them to procure the best talent in the marketplace and do so safely. That's what we all want to happen. So actually, it's a sharing of the same goals.
You wouldn't stitch up people in your industry, but how do you feel? Is this common practice now? Is it increasingly common practice, or do you still feel like there's a mindset of this will blow over and we'll just go back to?
I think there's definitely been a little bit of that if I look at some of our competitors. But I also think that customers are then looking with more rigour at their supply chain and actually looking right through that supply chain. And this, for me, is it's a differentiator, because we're able to sit in front of our customers and share that knowledge with them. And I think the fact that we're willing to do that and we're willing to educate them, that is the difference between us and another recruitment company doing things right.
And I think the industry as a whole, with the best will in the world, IR35 is complex. It's not an easy topic. You can't read a blog post on it or watch a webinar and then understand how to go forward with it. So I think even those agencies that might want to do things in the right way, it's not an easy thing to navigate. As you said earlier, we've been working on our approach for sort of 18 months, and it has involved lots of conversations with IR35 assessors, with insurers, with end clients, with contractors, to make sure that the end product that we deliver is right for everybody. It protects everybody from risk. It delivers fair assessment. It's user friendly. All of that has taken time and investment, and I don't think you can just come in it cold and say, oh, for IR35 we'll take this thing off the shelf. And that's not an easy thing to ask a lot of agents to do. There's a lot of kind of there's a lot of noise, so it's hard for agents, I think, to do the right thing.
You're using third parties to help do the assessments, but your background, you know, so you're ex-revenue?
Yes.
Is that right? Okay, so you know, so there's somebody who should really grasp and understand this and think, actually, yeah, we can march on and do this in-house.
Yeah.
So why is it you decided to engage third parties to help you out?
Yeah, so we do, so I do sort of a pre-assessment with our clients, so I'll talk to them about their working practices, generally on a kind of a client-wide basis, and I'll talk to them about what outside IR35 will look like and what inside might look like and how they might be able to change their working practices and things like that. But on the contract by contract basis, for us it was really important that the risk is insured.
Right, okay.
There's a lot of discussion about why that might be the case, but for me it simply is a case of HMRC may well disagree with the way some businesses assess outside IR35. They may well think, well, I think that should be inside, but ultimately that's not uncommon in the industry. There's lots of IR35 assessors out there who will say, I think this is outside IR35, and HMRC may well challenge it. What I wanted was for that challenge to happen outside of our clients' sphere.
Okay.
It was really important that somebody else is going to have that discussion with HMRC.
Yes.
They're going to provide the evidence. They're going to meet all of those legal requirements so that our business and our clients' businesses aren't disrupted by any sort of future challenges. Yeah. And the way to do that is to use a third-party assessment tool. The other thing is, you know, we're recruitment, so we are great at putting together great contracts with great contractors, great people with great jobs. We could diversify and say, okay, well, we'll also do all of your IR35 assessments, but fundamentally it's about, does that meet our purpose? Is that going to help people and organisations reach their potential? Yeah. So for us, it was about what's the best approach to reach that end goal.
Yes.
And for now, that's third-party assessment tools. And I mean, I've looked at every single one on the market.
Yes.
So where we are is we have an understanding of which tools we'll accept. So we've partnered ourselves with a specific tool, but there are other tools where we'll completely accept the determination, that's absolutely fine, and we'll still ensure the determination.
Yes.
And there's some tools where we say, essentially that hasn't happened, we'll still need to do our own assessment. Yes. So it allows us, I think, to be quite flexible in how we do things. It allows us to use a range of different assessment tools, to be confident that when we're doing our own that we know what the outcome's going to be, and I think it's a good fit all round that approach. Yeah,
and I think this is something I've seen more and more, which is it's recruiters who are going in there and kind of standing shoulder to shoulder with clients and saying, actually, you know what, we'll take this away for you. We'll sort it out. We can help you. So once the end client has to, you know, the kind of the duty when it comes to actual terminations, the fact that recruiters, the good recruiters there in the middle, are saying, actually, we can bring together some really skilled experts, and third parties will do those assessments for you. They can do it at volume as well, you know, so, you know, no matter how many contracts you've got, they will take care of it for you. And not only that, should there be any challenge, it's all down on them, and they will, you know, they'll take care of it.
It's completely insured and it's completely safe. And I think where some of our clients have seen some real value is, obviously we're able to source contractors, but where they already have a direct population, being able to insure those direct contractors and actually put them through evolution. I think a lot of companies have actually, they've really taken us up on that offer, because that's something where I think they had their biggest risk with their direct contractors, where there was no recruitment company in between, and that was a big fear factor for some of our customers.
Yeah, and I think what we've uncovered as well through the process of doing that, when you have conversations with clients and you say, well, how are you assessing the IR35 status for direct contractors? And you sort of take that conversation into its natural place. I'll then talk to them about, well, what other due diligence are you doing around those direct contractors? Are you checking the business that you're paying is registered in the UK? Are you checking whether they're suitably registered, or their insurance? And I think there's a lot of due diligence that perhaps wasn't happening. It was sort of an invisible risk, if you like, and all of a sudden that's come to the surface, and it makes people realise that actually there's a lot more risk here than we thought originally. And there's a way of mitigating.
So you're saying this risk is now starting to sound a bit complex.
Yeah.
And then, is it starting to sound costly as well?
Absolutely.
Exactly.
I'd even go so far as to say some businesses didn't really even understand who was off payroll in their organisation to even start with.
Yeah.
So that would be a range of businesses from household names right through to small SMEs, and you'd be surprised at the companies don't even know who is actually working off payroll in their organisation.
Yeah, every client we've spoken to has more contractors than they think they have in the initial meeting.
Right, okay.
Once you explain what off payroll means, clients say, that means Jimmy's probably a contractor then as well. We didn't have him on our list.
Yes.
There's a lot of that. So it's a useful piece for clients to go through.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's more risk, more cost, more complexity than they potentially initially imagined.
Yes.
So Jen, Evolution have chosen not to use cest. Could you explain our reasoning for that?
Yeah, so cest is the check employment status tool that HMRC have developed and put out there. It's on its second iteration in the past sort of year. A series of questions that clients or contractors can respond to that determines whether somebody is ostensibly inside or outside of IR35. And there's a few factors in why we've chosen not to use it. So first of all, it doesn't give you an answer in every case. So I think it's 85% they think it gives you an answer. So there's still a chunk of cases where you wouldn't be able to come up with an assessment. And those that it does, I think there's some fundamental sort of questions around cest. So it excludes mutuality of obligation, which is a key test and comes up in most IR35 cases, and HMRC's view on mutuality of obligation just doesn't concur with tax tribunals. So I can't, in good conscience, recommend something that excludes a key fundamental sort of legal principle. I also think the way that the questions are worded are weighted towards a certain outcome, and I don't think that's particularly helpful. And I think when you just compare it with what else is available on the market, I think you look at it and think, well, why would I use this from a usability perspective, from an audit trail perspective? And the kicker for me, for our business, was you cannot get an insurance product that will ensure a cest determination. So the insurance companies are not willing to stand behind a cest determination that's been arrived at reasonably and fairly, and that's echoed by HMRC. They've themselves had opportunities to say, okay, cest determination has said X, and they said, well, actually it doesn't count because they didn't quite answer the questions correctly. So for me, you can't rely on it. It doesn't cover the correct legal principles. You can't get insurance for it. It's not a great user experience, and it won't tell you a determination in all cases. So for me, it was a fairly easy answer.
Particularly when you consider the alternatives. So if you use a third-party assessor, these things aren't terribly expensive. You're not. This is not some niche thing which is going to cost you thousands and thousands of pounds. It's a lot more affordable than you think, and the risk is taken away. And you've also got to consider with cest, the feedback that we've seen from contractors, that people who are driving cest don't quite understand the context of the questions that they're answering.
Yes.
So why would you upskill people in your organisation to learn this one tool, which you say is fundamental? There's flaws in it anyway, when you could just get somebody else to do it and take the whole thing.
Why do you think so many customers are therefore relying on cest? Why do we think that's the case?
It's got to be lack of awareness. It's nothing more than that. It's just not realising. So lots of people are quite late to the pass with off payroll reform and getting ready for April. I think people have only just come back off their Christmas holiday and gone, that thing I'm going to sort it out in May, June time when the dust settles. And now they're realising they haven't got an alternative. And the first thing that comes up and all the recommendations say go and use cest. But they don't realise there's people out there who can do a better job. The other thing to say from a contractor's point of view, so if you're a client and you're using cest, what's it going to look like through the eyes of your contractors? They're not going to be satisfied with an inside IR35 determination that comes from cest because of these flaws that Jen's pointed out, that there's so many key questions that aren't asked in cest. So there's always going to be a little bit of suspicion from a contractor who's using cest. The second question would then be, so as you know with IR35 in April, you have to give contractors the right to appeal a determination. So if you're a savvy contractor and you've been given a cest inside IR35 determination, contractors know about these third parties and they'd say, would you mind assessing this contract for me, and coming back, and if you're sat there in a client, you've done your cest assessment, and then a third-party assessment lands on your desk and says, actually, for these reasons that you haven't considered because cest never asked you the questions, this person's outside IR35. So anyone I speak to, the recommendation is, if you want to use cest, it's fine, but it's got to be part of a much bigger and broader process. Yeah. Or alternatively, get somebody in to help you. Because at the end of the day, again, you think if you're there running and leading a business, do you really want to upskill your team to learn how to use this one tool and navigate this one piece of legislation? I mean, so I run a business and I'm not an expert in employment law, and that's why we work with a really good consultancy firm who are insured to take care of all of our employment law questions, because it's just not what I want to do as a business leader.
I think the right to appeal isn't as widely known as you might think within end clients. So I think that they might be making determinations now. The contractor could be unhappy with that determination, and I think they could see a knock-on effect on those decisions being made if they rely completely and solely on cest.
Yeah. And I think the thing around appeal as well that's interesting, obviously a client has 45 days to respond to an appeal, but actually a contractor can appeal at any point in the contract. So at any point a contractor can say, actually, I'm working in a genuinely outside IR35 basis here, I would like you to look at it again. If you look at what comes from cest in terms of the determination and the audit trail, I just don't think it really would meet a client's needs. I think it's a good first step if you've got no understanding of what IR35 is, and it gives you a flavour as to what the tests are. But my advice would definitely be to use an independent tool. And as you say, I think it's one of those things that we're in recruitment, I'm in compliance. I could name a dozen IR35 assessors off the top of my head for clients that, if you're a widget factory, you don't know anything about IR35 assessors. You don't know that there's an industry that exists where there's people who have been honing tools for 20 years to say, let's look at every tribunal that comes out, let's look at every decision, let's ensure that we are balancing risk against the opportunity, let's make sure we're talking to insurance companies and make sure that they feel we've properly mitigated the risk. People just don't know that this exists. And whenever you read the government sort of their fact sheets or anything, cest is the only thing that's mentioned. So people tend to think it's cest or just me, when in fact it's not. There's a whole host of experts.
We've had a couple of examples recently where decisions have been made by customers, and that decision has been made that to use cest and the status to be inside. But then following a conversation with you, following a little bit more education and a little bit more listening on behalf of the customer, they've actually been able to change that opinion, haven't they? We've had a couple of examples of that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the thing for clients that really resonates is, first of all, they didn't realise they had an option to use something different, and they didn't realise that insurance was available, and that if they properly scope the work to be outside IR35, they do a robust assessment using an independent tool, and then get an insurance product to sort of sit behind that, then they have properly mitigated the risk. They just don't know that's a possibility.
And the thing that so I first learned about the insurance products a few months ago. The thing that immediately sprang to mind is that these insurance products aren't expensive. So you're talking tens of pounds a month.
Absolutely.
So the contractor has probably only just had his morning cup of coffee and the insurance is paid for. So it's one thing to say, right, it's affordable, but actually it's the bigger thing of what that implies. Large insurance companies are willing to take on this risk, and the premiums aren't that high if you use a third-party assessment tool. And that goes to show that these insurance companies have confidence in these third-party tools, in their ability to assess this correctly and mitigate the risk and incorrect determination. And these same insurance companies won't go near cest. And that itself is, I think, is a really big thing.
That volumes, doesn't it?
And the insurance companies that we're talking about, the underwriters here are really big names. People that you would know are the people who underwrite these insurance policies. And they're saying, use a third party and there is nothing to worry about. And that's reflected in the premiums.
And I think it's really important to add at this point that we're not trying to skew the decision.
No.
It has to be genuine outside IR35 statuses, which will be therefore insured. So I think that's a really important thing to note. We're not trying to say it's outside when actually it's an inside the IR35 contract that's taking place.
Yes.
So it's a common misconception that outside IR35 dodgy in some way.
Yes.
What's your thoughts on that?
I think so. I mean, if you go back to the horse's mouth on that and actually look at the policy paper that comes from HMRC, and this is where I think people get confused with the numbers. So HMRC have said that 2/3 of contractors are legitimately outside IR35, and they said a third are inside IR35, and of that third, 90% are currently non-compliant, as they call it, i.e. they think they're outside, but they're actually inside. But the message is 7 out of 10 contractors are, in the eyes of HMRC, legitimately outside IR35.
So that's where we get the 90% of contractors are non-compliant, and therefore 90% of contracts should be inside IR35.
Absolutely, and that's where the confusion comes from. But no, IR35 is not dodgy.
So what do we think of clients that think they're mitigating the risk by saying PAYE only, that's really safe, or umbrella only? Yeah,
okay. So I mean, there's two things there to discuss. So on the PAYE only, I think the thing to bear in mind is that you may feel like you're mitigating the risk to a certain extent here, but you might be creating consequential risks over here. And the reason why I say that is that if we look at, so we did a piece of research with Off Payroll recently, where we did a piece of research with 1,500 contractors, and those who were pushed onto PAYE, 50% said they would leave immediately. And there's another cohort, about 20%, who sat there and said, yeah, I'd accept it in the short term, but as soon as a better offer came along, I would be off. And by better offer, they mean a fairly assessed role.
Yeah.
So why is that?
So why is it? I think so. There's four main drivers around this. Is first and foremost, you've got to remember a lot of contractors and consultants are very confident in their IR35 status. 44% of them have used somebody else's in the status and have proven that they're outside IR35. Secondly, what I think a lot of end clients don't realise is that contractors and consultants don't trust HMRC. So 91% of contractors and consultants fear that if they move outside IR35 onto PAYE within the same client, they've effectively gone outside IR35 to inside IR35, and they're concerned, despite HMRC's assurances to the contrary, that they could be open to a tax investigation. HMRC have got a terrible track record in winning these, so when it gets to tribunal, very low success rate, but no contractor wants the stress of the investigation, regardless of the outcome. The stress of the tax investigation is huge. So that's happening. They're confident in their status, and also a lot of contractors have got war chests. So they've been saving. You know, they are true contractors. They're ready for these fallow times, and they're prepared to actually drop out and sit on the bench for a couple of months. So the question is: PAYE the safest low risk option? In some ways, yes, it may well be, but think about the consequential risks that brings to your projects. Could you cope with 15, 20, 25, 50% of your contractors downing tools and walking away? And I suspect that risk outweighs your risk.
It comes straight back to the talent attraction point. You will be unlikely to attract the best talent on a contract basis if you only offer PAYE inside IR35 contracts. Yeah. Fundamentally, that's the case.
Yeah.
In terms of umbrella options,
yes.
What sort of things do you think clients and contractors should be wary of?
So, I mean, whenever anybody asks us about, we get asked all the time for umbrella recommendations, and our answer is really, really simple. Get an FCSA approved umbrella. So this is a third party professional body that vets umbrellas and makes sure what they're doing is lawful. Mm-hmm. The reason why this is important, and there was something called the loan charge, it's called the loan charge scandal, but basically a lot of contractors, and not just IT contractors, we're talking about lots of contingent workers, were caught up using umbrellas, which turned out to be using quite shady practices behind the scenes, and as a result some people have got some quite life-changing tax bills as a result of this. So there is a bit of mistrust around umbrellas at the moment, and the safest option for everybody is to recommend an FCSA approved umbrella, because you know that they're operating in a lawful manner.
Yeah, I think we've made the decision. We have a small ASL of umbrellas. They're all accredited.
Yes.
We work really closely with the FCSA for that reason, because it's really important that we don't play past the parcel with risk.
Yeah.
We don't say we've got an IR35 risk, so we pass it on so that it's an umbrella risk, because ultimately it will be the contractor that bears the brunt of that risk.
Yes.
So it's important that we don't, by protecting our clients from risk, actually create a new risk down the supply chain for our contractors. It's important that the approach is balanced and fair to both parties.
So if a customer or a client is at the point where they're just starting everything from scratch, what would be the best first step for them to take?
It's a really good question, and I think one of the key things for me is you don't have to become an IR35 expert. You can engage with people who have already done the legwork for you. They've already spent the hours and the years reading and learning about the complexities of IR35. I speak to so many clients who have got a couple of steps down the journey, and they've said, okay, I understand all of this stuff now, can we have a conversation? And when we have a conversation, they say, I wish we'd spoken before I'd done all of the legwork. So I think the best first step is to speak to somebody who's in the industry, who understands the complexities of IR35, because it depends very much on your business challenges. So I'll speak to some clients who will say that the most important thing to us is talent attraction, and we can be flexible on everything else, but we've got to have the best talent available. And I'll speak to some clients who say we've got very rigid working practices and we cannot flex them at all, they have to stay like this, but we can afford to potentially pay a little bit more or to look further afield for contractors. That every client has a specific set of requirements and a specific challenge. So it's important that rather than read a lot of generic IR35 information, you can kind of shortcut that and go straight to the heart of it and really understand the best way to address your specific challenge, I think.
And April 6th is obviously the deadline for this legislation. Have customers still got time to be able to get their house in order, so to speak?
Yes, we are fast running into the deadline. We are running out of rope. There's no two ways about it. However, the recent change to the way the legislation will be implemented, so it no longer covers payments after the 6th of April, it only covers work delivered after the 6th of April now, means that there is a little bit of a reprieve for clients, so there is a little bit more time than there have been previously. But what I would say is it's never too late, because ultimately it has to be addressed. So even if clients have come into it and it is almost too late to be in time, it still has to be addressed. And the worst thing that a client can do is make a knee-jerk, quick reaction thinking, I haven't got enough time, so I'm going to put everybody on PAYE, and that will be the solution, because actually all you're doing is transferring the risk. So it's always worth having that conversation and figuring out a robust, fair way to go about things. For contractors coming to this cold, yes. Obviously they'll have some understanding of IR35, but they don't necessarily know the impacts of the reforms that are coming in April 6th. What do you think is the best first step for them to take?
I think so if a contract's in an organisation where IR35 isn't been talked about yet, it's probably time for the contractor to step in and start pushing that conversation. And contractors have been dealing with IR35 for 20 years, and many of them are fully aware of it. But not many clients are quite there yet. There's still a big cohort of clients who think they can get away with doing this later on in the year. And I've personally spoken to contractors who've been proactive with clients and said, this is coming along, this is how it's going to impact you. The penny drops in the client's mind, and the contractors there say, actually, it's straightforward, and this is how we can help you out. Because everybody's in this together, so the contractor can do some signposting and say, look, why don't you talk to these people about getting the IR35 assessments done? Don't take this burden on your own. Let's look at our working practices together. The contractor can flex, the client can flex, and make sure that everybody gets the determination that's right for them. So if you're sitting there in silence, I'd say to contractors, be proactive, engage your client, and it may well be that they thank you for helping them.